we will have the last session of the day, and we will have the last session of our event. We are going to hear about the biopharmaceutical logistics trend and solution, and we have Cold Chain Platform CEO Kim Hee-yang who will proceed over the last session.
네, 안녕하십니까?
Hello everyone. Welcome everyone to Bioplus-Interphex Korea 2021. This conference is sponsored by Samsung Bioepis, Hanmi Pharma EnviroTrainer, Mark Rosen, Sartorius, and 11 companies. I am the moderator of this session, Biopharma Cold Chain Logistics Trend and Solution. My name is Kim Hee-yang, and I am the CEO of Cold Chain Platform. Even if you make a very high-quality drug, if logistics cannot help you deliver it, then it cannot be delivered to the patient who desperately needs the drug. Going through the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a lot of confusion and changes in the market due to many logistics challenges. In particular, in biopharma, including vaccines, cold chain is essential. So the importance of cold chain and logistics is becoming pronounced more than ever. In this session, we're going to hear from 4 presenters, and they will share with us their experiences and insight. We will not have a separate Q&A session, so I will ask for your understanding.
소개해드리겠습니다.
I'd like to introduce to you the first speaker we have from Samsung Bioepis, Ms. Chris Lee, who is the Vice President of Supply Chain at Samsung Bioepis. She has 20 years experience in chemistry and bio, and she has been in charge of supply chain issues. And she's going to talk about the global pharmaceutical companies' logistics challenge and response measures. Please.
Hello, my name is Chris Lee, Vice President of Supply Chain at Samsung Bioepis. I hope everyone is doing well. First, I would like to thank Bioplus in providing me with an opportunity to present at this year's forum. It's been a while since I last saw everyone and presented a topic on cold chain. This year, I would like to provide everyone with an update on the current logistics landscape for a global biopharmaceutical company, and the global biopharmaceutical company being Samsung Bioepis in this case. One slide on the disclosure of conflict of interest as a formality. I will provide Samsung Bioepis' approach to our long and short-term logistics strategy today, especially on updates for cost reduction efforts and collaboration with vendors. And because our lives have been greatly impacted by COVID for the last 2 years, I will also provide an update on activities SBE has put in place to overcoming COVID for logistics. As I have mentioned on the agenda, some of our short and long-term strategies are around cost reduction and working with vendors, which I will get to later. Along with these short-term and long-term strategies, underlining objectives are really around minimizing and reducing operational risks as highlighted in dotted circle. But because the last 2 years, our lives were greatly impacted by COVID, the core issue at the end of the day was to execute all of our logistics activities with COVID in mind and to mitigate our operational risks based on COVID happenings. And because of COVID, at Samsung Bioepis, we activated our emergency operations and worked to minimize late deliveries, cost increases, and ultimately to alleviate pressures on our vendors during these times. Activation of emergency operations played a key role for our company in 2020 and early part of 2021. I will explain the details in the following slides. Our lives have been ruled by COVID for the last 2 years. Since December of 2019, our logistics team's day-to-day operations has been greatly impacted by the COVID pandemic. We've experienced flight cancellations, border shutdowns, limited resources, this includes people and raw materials, to support our pickups, drop-offs, which impacts loading and offloading when we look at the overall end-to-end logistics supply chain. Due to all of these factors, we've seen our logistics costs surging up, creating financial and operations burden on our supply chain. Based on this, the team implemented emergency operations, and this was utilized until beginning of this year on a daily basis. Emergency operations was created based on our supply chain. Emergency operations looked at our supply chain and identified all risks within our supply chain and identified approaches to manage those risks and how to monitor and mitigate them are implemented. First, based on our supply chain, we developed risk categorization, which are regional or country-based, consequential risks, which are in this case shipments or number of shipments impacted. Second, based on our supply chain, we identified risk-based control. How do we control these risks and what can be done to mitigate them? And these are identified as updating work instructions and updating contingency plans. Third, based on our supply chain, how do we keep monitoring and reviewing our status and update our emergency operations based on the COVID landscape? Goal of the emergency operations is ultimately to utilize our services as much as possible during COVID, not to impact our company's milestones and services as we provide logistics to our internal clients. Emergency operations is a stepwise approach, leveraging and mitigating against different risks. For risk categorization, as mentioned, based on our supply chain, we've highlighted regions or number of countries that are impacted by COVID. In this case, border shutdowns for a number of countries being impacted, thus provides information on being able to identify flight cancellations and limitations on material movements within the country or across countries. All or most of the data developed and gathered were gained from CDC updates or websites providing information on country and cities with shutdown and border shutdowns. For risk-based control, we looked at our overall logistics process. We placed additional review or checkpoints on the overall logistics itself. For contingency plan, we looked at different failure modes. We provided different work instructions for certain circumstances. As mentioned, consequential risks are the number of shipments that are rated high, medium, low. High are the ones with most impacted to programs and company milestones. So when you look at logistics of shipping, it's movement of material from point A to point B. At high level, it's scheduling, pickup, exporting material out of the country, then importing that material into country, and at the end, ultimately receiving material at a different site. Prior to emergency operations, our normal pre-scheduling might be 2 weeks in advance with last-minute shipping requests. With emergency operations, we put in place pre-scheduling requests to be made 2 to 1 month in advance. We would pre-book these shipments with logistics companies months in advance, and based on the regional country-level risks, we would book alternate backup shipping routes if the shipments are highlighted as shipping from or going to high-risk countries, or if shipment itself were high-risk important shipments. For example, if shipment needs to go into Finland and normally it connects through Germany, we would set up a backup schedule of going into Finland through Switzerland as a backup, or the backup country could be a not highlighted on the regional risk as high in case border shutdowns and flight cancellations. Based on regional risks and consequential risks, your schedules are updated on weekly basis. Also, as a contingency plan, instead of having 1 month supply of raw materials, and this raw materials being shippers and temptails, we would store 3 times more, and we would also assess our raw material vendors on their ability to supply on regular basis based on raw materials country of origin. So if the raw material was manufactured in a country that are shut down and is flagged as high-risk country, we would increase our raw material safety stock to a higher level to mitigate against potential stockouts. With implementation of emergency operations, KPI and month-end closing became even more important during COVID. Month-end closing process was stressed to control risk-based increase in financial costs and lead times due to COVID. We've also highlighted additional new KPIs to review in details to create database and to control and manage activities and costs. We created a monthly cycle, as you can see on your left, which included shipment reviews, incident reviews, and these incidents that are new, which created delays in shipments. And we confirmed the root cause of these new delays. And we've also placed CAPA to address these new root causes so it won't happen again. This cycle created a review process on a monthly basis, which addressed new issues, and those issues were resolved within a month. Towards the end of emergency operations, as you can see from the right side of the chart, we were able to perform our logistics services without deviating from our normal service targets. And this is without cancellations or without additional expediting costs. Long-term strategy, and in this case, cost reduction efforts, will be presented. What were the pros and the cons? A couple of years ago, we engaged a logistics company, a consulting company, I apologize. We engaged a consulting company to execute a logistics assessment for the entire company and try to identify areas where great improvements could be made. Consulting highlighted potential areas of improvements and highlighted potential areas of risks as well. Based on this, we prioritized our long-term strategy activities and decided to fast-track one of our projects, which is implementing our large container shipping via ocean. Shipping qualification, regulatory approval, and implementation are our normal process for implementing new shippers or shipping solution. What we've added in the front is evaluation necessary for project initiation. We reviewed the business requirements, evaluated the ROI on this potential solution, and assessment confirmed that the value of impact was greater from cost and operations perspective, and decided to fast-track the project. Left side, various requirements were built into the standard shipping qualification approach of development in URS, execution of DQ, OQ, and PQ with CTD updates. Included in the PQ was our worst shipping lane creation. The container was on the water for close to 90 days, covering 40,000 kilometers. At the end, the new shipping container via ocean was approved and implemented. Post-implementation on new shipping container, there were several pros and cons. Pro, various shipping solutions can be leveraged once qualifications are executed at worst stage. As we've shown before, we took the worst lane, covering 90 days and 40,000 kilometers. Also forced the team to better understand regulatory agency requirements for shipping qualification. This fell under new shipping container that needed a new shipping mode, which was shipping the container via ocean. Con, in this case, is timing of the shipping solution benefits. It must be reevaluated post-implementation. Based on our current supply chain, there was a delay in realizing the cost reduction implemented for a certain shipping solution. Because the large container required bigger material volume movements, the recognition of full value could come at a later time than the original project assumed. Second is that initial implementation at CMO sites could be delayed due to time required on implementation. Additional time must be taken into consideration, and it might be needed to implement and roll out at all CMO sites, also need to be factored in. At the end, it's always good to execute a lessons learned to highlight pros and cons of the project completed. Last topic is on collaboration with vendors for win-win strategy. We recently developed another large container for shipping purposes, and this newly developed large container is now currently being used at our vendor site as a storage container as well. Reduction of storage area is key in optimizing costs and minimizing handling at warehouses or at CMO facilities. We had recently developed a large container which doubled the number of materials to be shipped, and we were in the process of rolling this out with our vendors. With this new solution rollout, our vendor approached us and stating that they would also like to utilize this large shipping container for storage purposes in their warehouse. And with the implementation of these new large containers, it allowed the vendor to reduce their pallet positions needed by half for our material. During COVID, our vendors were facing raw material sourcing issues and lack of space issues due to logistics constraints. The big lesson learned in this case was frequent communications on our latest information sharing. For example, this project. As an example, sharing information on development of new shipping containers by us would allow our vendors the opportunity to leverage these containers for other purposes or provided them with different options to consider. It also provided us with a lesson that these communications or updates should be systematized rather than as an ad hoc basis. Therefore, based on this experience, we've decided to include these project updates at our regular business review meetings. At the end, this set both partners, the client and our vendor, for a win-win situation for both of us to benefit. Vendor from a space reduction opportunity and for client on a storage cost reduction opportunity. For us, it was a win-win for us both. This is the last slide of my presentation. I hope the items presented here today provided some insights or provided you with new ideas to be implemented or thought of. 2021 has been a long, extended year for us all. We are still dealing with COVID. However, with vaccines and potential development of COVID treatments in the pipeline, going into 2022 brings us hope that we will be back to normal soon. One day, I can say that with vaccine distribution in 2021, I apologize. One thing that I can say is that with vaccine distribution in 2021, it has really brought cold chain into forefront and a topic to be discussed outside of our industry. It truly highlights the challenges people within our industry deals with on a day-to-day basis to distribute our products under these challenging times. I look forward to discussing new shipping solution developments and new ideas in logistics services that will come out post-COVID. Thank you for this opportunity to present at Bioplus 2021. Stay healthy and be well. I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
네, 이소영 상무님 발표 감사합니다.
Thank you, Ms. Lee So-young. You were able to show us the example of Bioepis about the emergency operation and how you dealt with the pandemic crisis wisely. And you talked about the monthly incident review and the CAPA review. And I think many companies miss that a lot. This was a lesson learned. And as for the long-term solution, you talked about the shipping solution, not only Korea, but the shipping solution by ocean is considered as an option by other countries, and I think it was worth comparing with other options. So thank you very much. And now we are moving on to an endemic age from pandemic, and we need to reestablish the logistics process that we can deal with the unexpected crises in a flexible manner, and we need more effective collaboration with the partners.
발표
Now we will go to the next presentation. The next presenter is Emmanuel Schapper from Elpro. Elpro is a temperature monitoring company with a headquarters in Switzerland. Emmanuel Schapper is the key account management head of Elpro and is an expert in pharmaceutical logistics and temperature data management. We will hear about approaches for an end-to-end temperature monitoring in biopharma logistics. I would like to ask Emmanuel Schapper to deliver presentation.
So welcome to the presentation of Elpro. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Emmanuel Schapper. I'm with Elpro since 6 years and responsible for our key account management organization. Today we discuss approaches for end-to-end temperature monitoring in biopharma logistics. And I would like to go into this topic from different perspectives in the course of this presentation. To do this, I would like to include these topics. We would like to talk about requirements and challenges of end-to-end temperature monitoring in pharmaceutical logistics, to look at today's options that we have to realize increased visibility in the temperature controlled supply chains, and we would like to look at new technologies available in order to support a real full end-to-end perspective. Before we start, just a few words on Elpro. We are a global provider of environmental conditions monitoring solutions. We develop, produce our own ranges, our own brands, and we are very much concentrated and focused on pharma, biotech, biobanking, life science and healthcare applications and industries. With our solutions, we care for providing meaningful data to pharmaceutical manufacturers and their partners as well, in order to provide hard evidence that products, that medicines have been safely handled throughout the whole supply chain, from the laboratory down to the patients. And therefore, our solutions include features to measure conditions, to store them, to assess the conditions against profiles, to create reports on this, but also to alarm immediately if deviations occur, and also to manage data in order to make data valuable, significant in order to do analytics, for example. With our solutions, we look into the entire supply chain, from R&D down to the place where the medication is handed over to the patients, and we look at different objects. So we look at products, at shipments, or rooms, or equipment like fridges, for example, or freezers. So our solutions do cover all these objects. The Ecoloc range, for example, is for rooms and equipment in a network. The independent range is for smaller rooms or standalone equipment. And the Libero product range is for the stability monitoring for products in transit, so for transport monitoring. And along with the hard and software solutions, our GXP and project specialists offer consulting and GXP services such as qualifications, mappings, project management, and of course also calibrations for the logging devices that we offer. We are headquartered in Switzerland and do operate through different offices all over the world almost, as you see on the list here. And we also work together with a network of certified partners for local installations and local maintenance. But now let's dive into our topic. And when we think first about the scope within end-to-end visibility, let's ask ourselves, first of all, what are the goals that we want to achieve with an end-to-end visibility? So the first one certainly is we want to make sure that medication is safe, that it's handed over in very good conditions to the patients. And on the other hand, of course, we want to have visibility and control on our supply chains, on our lanes. So when we look at the typical steps in a pharma supply chain, as you see here below, then end-to-end doesn't necessarily mean the same for all of us. Your end-to-end scope might be just a part of the road from an API to the patient's home. And certainly this depends on your role and responsibility within the supply chain. And it might differ also from product to product, whether it's, for example, a commercially marketed product or whether it is a clinical trial supply chain we're talking about. So for you, your question is actually, where is my starting point? Where is my end in this end-to-end perspective? And probably if you would like to create a project to increase visibility, it would make sense to also think in different steps and to develop stepwise an increased visibility of your supply chain. Otherwise, such a project, such an implementation would certainly be very complex and very difficult to manage as well. So probably you could start with identifying which are my most relevant steps within the entire supply chain, or the high risk steps within the supply chain, and then take it from there and then ask yourself, okay, now for this step that I would like to look at, which data is necessary for me here? Is data available? How is the data collected? Where is it archived? In which responsibility is the data? And also important, are there third parties involved? Do you then have access to that data in order to work with it? And now, apart from the goals that we just saw, the visibility, the control, and the safety of the product, I would like to draw your attention to another aspect that we have to be aware of. Because in order to achieve this full visibility and control, on one hand, here on the left-hand side, the focus here is on the flow of goods, the routes, the lanes, the shipments, stopovers, warehouses in between, and so on. So this has to be somehow combined, also with environmental information, of course. But the flow of goods, the logistics information is the focus. On the other hand, in order to achieve the certainty that the medication is safe to be administered to the patient, the focus needs to be on stability, on the stability of the product. And we need to have data of the end-to-end stability assessment in order to determine whether the product is still good to hand over to the patient. So we think it's very important to distinguish the data requirements of these two main goals, whereas for the logistics visibility, we need to combine a lot of logistics information, but for the stability visibility, we need to make sure that measurement data is original, not corrupted, compliant with the regulations, and that all the tools being used to work with this measured information are also validated and in accordance with the regulatory requirements. So the second aspect is really about patient safety, and therefore those systems that we are using have to assure full data integrity. For all what we just discussed, and regardless whether it's more the logistics aspect or the product integrity aspect, data is key. And the sources for data are very diverse, as explained here. So we have data loggers for the temperature measurements. We have internal systems for the profiles, for example, for the stability information. We might have an ERP system providing information, a track and trace system, and you might have logistic service providers which are also offering you certain information. So when we now want to create increased logistics visibility, so the first goal, just the logistics aspect, we can use some of this information here and then create, for example, dashboards where we see the different sensors somewhere in a warehouse or on the road, for example. We can then go into further details. We see several lanes, for example, in comparison. We can add milestones in order to see when does happen a certain deviation, for example. And we can also look into locations where certain events occur. So this logistics aspect is certainly also today already quite a well-developed area, and we have a lot of possibilities here to make this supply chain here much more visible from a pure logistics data aspect. When it comes to the other goal, the end-to-end stability overview, the requirements are higher because we not only have to make sure that the data is available, but also that the data is in full integrity. So we have to keep strict data structures. We have to protect them. They have to be compliant. And all the tools that we are using also have to be 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, for example. Today, getting a clear overview on the stability over several supply chain steps is sometimes a little bit like puzzling together several pieces of information, because often different solutions are used to monitor shipments or to monitor a warehouse, and often a common database is not available. In many cases, each individual step is perfectly monitored and documented, and the concept then is if all individual steps are okay, also the final result is okay. But this doesn't help to really have the entire view on the whole supply chain. So to support this a little bit better, and also to support multi-step assessments, there are tools available today, of course, which can help to get a better overview. For example, LProViewer, this is a software to analyze measurement rows of monitoring solutions. When we use an original file from a logger, for example, we can do several analytics and assessments. So profiles can be defined and applied. Handling errors can be corrected. For example, if somebody presses the stop button too late. Like this, then a reassessment can be made and a new report can be generated. And then when we talk about multi-step visibility, we have the possibility to join several measurement rows of several shipments, of several times of a product within a warehouse, for example. And then we can combine it to get the whole overview. Like we have it here on this example, we have the first row, which was within the tolerances, which was okay. Then we had a second shipment in this case, where we had deviations and therefore an alarm was triggered. Now, to get the full picture, now it can make sense to join these two rows actually, and then to do a recalculation, a reassessment over the whole part of it with a total profile. And then, for example, the second part can use some remaining stability that we still have from the first one. And then as a total would then be perfectly okay, because the whole stability budget has not been consumed up. So these are kind of multi-step assessments and therefore multi-step visibility of the stability of a product. Still quite manual. You have to collect the data, you have to bring that together in the software. Now here, the use of a compliant central data repository can be an important next step to further increase and also to make this easier. LPro's Libero Cloud, so-called Libero Manager, here is an option. So the monitoring data here of each single step can then be uploaded to that database, always in the original secure data format. So nothing will be extracted or reformatted. And also the database keeps this original data set, guarantee in full integrity. Even if further analysis, as we just said, are made, if information is joined, is reassessed, the original data remains always unchanged. With such a compliant central database, we offer increased visibility to the temperature-controlled supply chain stakeholders. They have immediate access to all the information, to the data. And then it's not only about visibility, but a central database also allows to automate communication, to automate processes. So for example, if a file with a deviation is uploaded, a designated person in charge can automatically receive a notification in order to start necessary activities. And as this central database, as Liberal Manager, is a 21 CFR Part 11 compliant software, it can also be used to conduct release relevant processes. Now, you remember we talked about the two aspects, the logistics visibility and the stability visibility. And of course, now it's interesting to combine these. And this can be done, for example, by adding the logger information, for example, to your ERP or your transport management system, in order then to enrich the pure temperature measurement data with, for example, shipment metadata. Like this, then, as we see here on the right-hand side, shipments can be visualized, identified and visualized, and combined with the corresponding temperature information as we have here below. And based on this, then further analytics can be generated and visualized, depending on the available data that we have in combination with the measured temperature rows. So until now, we talked about the different aspects, the goals, and what kind of possibilities do we have today in order to increase the visibility in the supply chain. The ultimate technology today, of course, to realize enhanced visibility and real-time data is, of course, powered by the mobile IoT developments. And here we have real-time, so-called real-time data loggers available, which permanently transmit measured data to a central database. They do this by using the mobile IoT communication networks. And they are specifically designed for the Internet of Things, for machine-to-machine communication, for the transmission of relatively low data volumes. The loggers do not only measure the temperature and humidity, but also register the geolocation and transmit also this information through the same network. And they do this in a very energy-saving way, and therefore the operational lifetime of these devices can be extended. A central database receives the data in real time, and the dashboard is then very convenient to have full control, an immediate overview on the status of the different sensors in the room, of different sensors on a transport, for example. And also here, if excursions occur, persons can be notified in order to take immediate action. And then they can look into the temperature rows, they can look into the location information, so to identify a shipment at the place of a shipment, and to combine this information in order to see how to react, how to intervene. Of course, real-time monitoring offers not only technology advantages, also from a process point of view. A lot of advantages are available in process automation, for example, mainly in proactive intervention, because we see immediately if something is happening with a shipment or a product. And also from a general systems perspective, we have advantages because data is always available, and this allows us to create accurate and highly significant analytics and also, for example, risk analysis, risk maps on certain lanes, or heat maps for specific distribution channels. And now if we expand this real-time concept and include several steps of our supply chain and also warehouses and also other storage facilities, then this will really offer end-to-end visibility over the whole life cycle, especially further down in the future when systems allow options to know which product was at which place at which time. Then we can not only track a shipment, for example, from A to B, but then we can really summarize all the information that we have in order to finally determine at the end, based on the total stability profile of a product, whether the medication is still safe to hand over to the patient. Now, to summarize, in order to achieve end-to-end visibility of your supply chain, first, distinguish between logistics visibility and stability assessment or stability visibility. Specify then the data which is needed for both aspects. And then take care not only for the data availability, but also for the data integrity, especially for the stability perspective of end-to-end. Then select tools to combine different monitoring solutions, so for rooms, for transports, and enrich your monitoring data with metadata, for example, shipment data, to create really the foundation of relevant data analytics and also predictive analytics. Connect then your data management with other systems to increase efficiency, and integrate real-time monitoring also for shipments with geolocation to increase the end-to-end visibility. So take a stepwise approach for in terms of the parts that you would like to have to look at in your end-to-end supply chain, and also take a stepwise approach in the development of your end-to-end, in the visibility of your end-to-end supply chain. Like this, you will be able to manage such an implementation project much easier. Well, this concludes our session, our presentation. And if you would like to further discuss with us, or if you have any questions, please get directly in contact with us. You can contact me. You see here my email address, or get in contact with Elpro Global on our LinkedIn account. With our colleagues somewhere in the area close to you. We will be happy to further discuss your requirements for a end-to-end temperature monitoring supply chain for your specific requirements. Thank you very much for your interest, and talk to you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.
네, 이마누엘님 발표 감사합니다.
Thank you, Mr. Emmanuel. We see that not only hospitals, but pharmacies, but the homes of patients are dealing with the temperature visibility of end-to-end drugs, and management of temperature data analysis and utilization are very important. Thank you for pointing this out, and it was very helpful in that you have given us a comprehensive introduction of temperature monitoring and new technologies. You said that data is key, and I couldn't agree with you more. No matter how well the cold chain distribution is well, if you don't have the temperature data, that would be meaningless. And you talked about logistics visibility and stability assessment, and that you need to differentiate between the two, and that was also helpful. In Korea, starting from January 17, there is going to be a revision to the rules for manufacturing and sales management of biologics. And so the distribution part has been reinforced, and temperature monitoring rules have been strengthened. So you should be able to monitor the temperature inside from the outside of the packaging. And so I think this presentation was of much help in complying with the future regulations. And now I'd like to move on to the next speaker. We have with us Mr. Erwin Wilfu, who is the CEO of Zulik Pharma. It is a global pharma distribution and healthcare solution. Mr. Erwin Wilfu used to be the CEO of Nestle Korea, and starting in 2018, he is leading Zulik Pharma Korea. He is going to talk about what makes cold chain distribution trustworthy. Mr. Wilfu, please go ahead.
Hello, and thank you for your time. I'm happy to share the session with you, and I'm going to just start with one slide to explain a bit what Zulik Pharma is doing. We've been working as a Swiss company. We privately owned. We've been working since 1922, and our mission is to make healthcare more accessible. And we have multiple activities, as you see on the screen here. We play in a critical role in clinical reach with over 1,000 trials that we supporting every year, with commercializing drugs with 2,500 reps on the fields and over 400 products commercialized. We also play a role in distribution with 200,000 customers and 87 warehouses across Asia. We have some distribution channels that we own, and also some patient program, and also taking growing importance some analytics and digital solutions. All these activities are here to help our clients to support HCPs and patients. Now, I'm going to talk about obviously the cold chain, because the intricacy of the pharmaceutical supply chain may not have been in the mainstream news for a few years, but recent event kicked the subject in the front page news. And what you see here is pictures of some issues that happened in Korea. And in 2020, the flu vaccination campaign in Korea made headlines during several months when it was discovered that some vaccines supplied by a local company, which need to be refrigerated at all times, had been exposed to room temperatures while being transported. These are the pictures that appeared online. A recall was ordered, and officials said that about 2,300 people had received doses from the faulty batch, which was meant mainly from young children and teenagers. And the Center for Disease and Control and Prevention also tried to explain the concerns about lack of temperature control. Was it rendered the vaccines ineffective rather than toxic? And a few days later, 615,000 doses of the flu vaccine shipped by another company was also recalled after some of them were found to contain some white particles, which the government described as being harmful proteins, and almost 18,000 people had received the doses before they were recalled, sometimes with great difficulties to trace back the full distribution process. Unfortunately, generated a wave of fury in the media and a negative sentiment among the population that turned into panic when 13 people died after they had been vaccinated against the seasonal influenza. Now, although the South Korean authorities, after investigation, explained there was no link between the death and the vaccination, the case caused panic at a critical time for the vaccination efforts. Now, issues related to cold chain has unfortunately been happening in many countries and making headlines, attracting attentions of the media. And there are multiple factors for that. It's not only the cold chain issues or temporary excursion. There's also issues related to secure environments, shorter expiry date, also some data being hacked, like some of the examples we see on these headlines. Now, the point which is important is that we live in a globalized economy with digitalized world where news is traveling extremely fast across social media. And that's adding some challenges to the crisis that we've seen in Korea, because what we've seen is that very quickly, the crisis in Korea was in the media all around the world. And it contributed to create a negative sentiments among patients that could have damaged companies' reputation worldwide. Now, Korea managed to eventually keep the crisis under control thanks to transparent communication, rapid investigation of prevented cases. And we also decided to reinforce aggressively the cold chain regulatory constraints, enforcing from next year a more constraint-free regulation for all transportation of biological drugs. Now, the other point which is important to look at in the context which has been evolving is the fact that patients are also changing. While they used to turn to doctors to seek information, they're now turning to the net to seek healthcare information. We know that 5% of searches on Google, for example, are related to search, which is over 1 billion queries per day. And we entered in what we call the patient experts era, where people don't listen to their practitioners anymore. They also check the information online. They self-diagnose themselves. They also check the prescriptions online. And we know that they're also losing trust in the doctors. We've seen that in the 1966 survey, for example, that we checked, 75% of Americans reported having high levels of confidence in medical workers. In 2019, only 15% of Americans reported feeling confidence about medical system. So I don't have the data for our part of the world, but I guess it's going a bit in the same direction. And the declining level of trust in the healthcare system reflects fundamentals and structural issues, which the way patients can access and receive care. It also reflects the importance to avoid doing mistakes and keeping our supply chain safe and compliant. And this is becoming very critical at a time when we need to get patients to be fully trusting the system to raise the vaccination ratio when important issues like the pandemic are rising up. With the coronavirus pandemic happening, the pharma supply chain was brought into the forefront yet again. There were issues like disruptions, unfair allocation of stocks, expiry dates, safety, security, traceability that have been coming up. And that doesn't help to raise the trust of the patients in the system. Now, it's also happening at a moment in time where the biological markets overall is increasing. We see on this slide the latest numbers in terms of how the sales growth of biopharma have been increasing, but also the logistics expanding. So it's also a matter which requires the attentions of the multiple players in the industry. And that's an important point, because we usually look mostly at the infrastructures and the equipment that we need, but increasing the capabilities and building an efficient cold chain requires to look after many aspects in the chain. On the government side, there needs to look at the SOP and the guidelines to be managed. There's a need of clear safety management regulations. On the manufacturer side is how we manage the end-to-end product quality. The financial burdens, obviously, which are coming with it. On the distributor side, detailed follow-up of the new regulations, people resources, but also in the doctor side and the pharmacies, there's some great needs in terms of training, in terms of helping them to handle the equipment, and the patients as well, as we've seen, that needs to be reassured. Now, what we do in Zurich Pharma is we use what we call this trust pyramid, which is important for us, that has as foundations necessity to get some very, very high standards in terms of quality. But beyond that, we say we have these pyramids where we say it's important to get the right infrastructures to manage the cold chain, but it's not enough. There are multiple things which are critical in the way we work. The processes and the systems, the tools we're using, and we'll see some of the examples later. And we need to have expert people at all levels in the organization. And these people have to stay in the company. We have to retain them. And the experience is also very critical, because we need to get people to be able to manage all sorts of situations. And the mindset is also important, to make sure people are expert, but also understand and manage the supply chain with a great quality to push always superior quality and compliance. Now, we've been working now with, I said, 100 years of experience, and we've been working with leading companies in pharma, in the consumer health, medical device, animal health. And obviously, we've been striving to provide superior operational excellence. But we've seen now in the previous years how this is not enough, and we need to come up with innovative solutions to serve them better. And before going through some of these solutions, I wanted to get through one small movie, which is giving examples on how we're operating. And that's examples coming from our operations in Taiwan for the vaccines distribution of COVID. Sorry, I started. You check the timing. How long do I have? Okay, I'll continue here, and just wanted to end my presentation showing some of the tools we've been using, and in these kind of operations, we also have, I mean, we obviously have some proprietary solution in terms of packagings to keep our products in temperatures for all the transportation time until we reach the end users. Another solution we've been using is a proprietary solution called Easy Tracker. Easy Tracker is an end-to-end blockchain solution that provides instantaneous traceability across the supply chain. It's used to trace the temperatures, to authenticate the products at any moments during the chain. And that's a tool that we've been deploying now across the region, which is really helping to reassure all the players up to the practitioners in the chain. All the tools also we're partnering with a company like Xylem, which is also helping us to visualize constantly all our trucks and helping us also to optimize the routing and and intervene very quickly in case any issues will be happening. We talked about education because that's also a point which is important, is making sure that we keep a strong link with the key partners we have on the field, because the supply chain, or the cold supply chain, and efficient cold supply chain is not stopping when the products are coming out from our trucks. It has to get until the patients. We have our B2B platform, which is now supporting, we're touching 90% of the customers, the pharmacies, clinics, hospitals in the region. And with that platform, we have millions of transactions every day, but it's also a platform we're using for educations and to make sure that we educate our pharmacists or clinicians to handle efficiently the products that they will have to pass to the patients afterwards. Data solutions are critical. We have tons of information coming from our hands, so we have invested in data solutions, data teams, which really worked in the past years to, first of all, capture this data, find ways to visualize them and give this visibility to our clients. But beyond that, trying now to work with the machine learnings and artificial intelligence tools to be able to predict through the data and take better decisions, specifically managing the stocks moving around the region. And then we start also developing some more integrated solutions like EasyVax that we developed and deployed in a few countries, which are really end-to-end vaccine management solutions, which are connecting the consumers or the patients, the pharmacists, and our drug manufacturers as well, to make sure that we really optimize the way that the end-to-end process between the manufacturers and the patients. Beyond all these solutions, I just want to finish my presentation talking about an important point as well, which is getting more and more important for our clients and for ourselves, is making sure that our supply chain is also sustainable. So we have really clear intentions and focus on making sure that we use the packagings. We will be starting now
네, 인터넷 사정으로 지금 발표.
The presentation was interrupted due to some connection issues. We would like to move on to the next presentation in the meanwhile.
SK 플라즈마의 최용준 팀장님입니다. 최용준 팀장님은 제약 분야에서 아주 다양한 업무를 수행.
The next presenter is Choi Yong-jun, team leader from SK Plasma, and he has been in many fields of pharmaceuticals. He is currently in global business development of SK Plaza and has worked at GC Green Cross in vaccine, clinical, RAGA, and global logistics and cold chain management. He will be talking about packaging and transportation strategy for temperature-controlled biopharmaceuticals. Please, Mr. Choi.
네, 잠시만요.
Just a second. I'd like to share with you my screen.
화면 잘 보이시나요?
Can you see my screen?
네.
Can you see my screen? Yes? Okay, I will then start my presentation. I am Choi Yong-jun working at SK Plasma. Today, we will be talking about some cases of what we've experienced in the market about the transport of biopharmaceuticals and some case studies. Let's look at what were the issues and how we were able to overcome those issues. When we transport pharmaceuticals, there are in some cases some incidents that occur, and I think then it's very challenging because there are the partners that need to deliver the product, and there is a lot of pressure, and we need to try to persuade them using data, but it's not easy. And when there is an incident, when we talk to insurers or with the forwarders, well, and the transport companies, well, they will not try to give us compensation. So we became very lonely. Cold chain service, or I believe, will matter greatly to the people who use the service. So the process of what I've been through in cold chain process, I believe, resides in the slides. I think there are some factors that are very important, which are packaging solutions, about what route we're going to use, how we're going to use the warehouses, and lastly is custom clearance. So this will be very important for a good cold chain system. Well, the picture might seem a little bit dramatic, but for low developing countries or places with low development of communications and transportation, this picture might be the reality. You can see the packaging solution on the right with a camel. Well, it has a photovoltaic module, and it can act in some aspect to maintain the temperature. These medications are very important, and they need to be administered to patients. And we will need to be concerned if this is actually what's happening in the transport process. The packaging solution that we use mostly, well, I believe that the experts in this field might be classifying this differently, but we call passive containers and active containers. So we would use them and largely distinguish them into two. For the single-use package, we have single double layer extended polystrand that we use, and between them we can see the coolants, so PCM or water bags are used. You can see for this packaging, it is very cost reasonable, but performance wise it might be a little bit less than perfect. So I will elaborate on this later on. And in passive packaging, unlike what I just mentioned, there is the pallet shipper. In this case, there are larger sized pallets, and then we have the packaging, and if we just load them inside, then we could use a forklift and load them right away. Advantage is because it's large in size. So many cargo can fit in that package, but the price is quite high. So that is a disadvantage. We also use passive containers. Passive containers have great performance, but the price points are quite high. We also have active containers, and unlike active containers, the passive containers will not be insured. Maybe I don't have enough knowledge, but I think for most passive containers, well, maybe some of them can be insured, but when I did my research, I think they were not able to be insured. So there might be some people who offer solutions based on this. So if they can be insured, then please let me know. So for active containers that we use, they use lithium-ion batteries or other types of batteries, and it directly controls temperature. According to the different sizes, they can hold up to 1 pallet or up to 4 pallets. So there could be different sizes. When we have the products that we need to transport, we would do the simulation to see what kind of volume is needed. And because we do this often, regarding the dimensions of our product and the dimensions of the container are well known to us, and we do our best to assign the height of the pallet so that we can put in the most cargo in a container. In some cases, we might have to use 2 containers and we might have some room left over. So this would incur high rental costs. So we would need to think about the optimized way to fill these containers. So I have talked about the transport methods mostly by air, and for the companies that are in exports, you probably will know that after COVID-19, the transport fees have skyrocketed. So we are doing our best to minimize transport costs, and we have done many cost analysis for sea transport, and we are doing some path runs to gather more data. You can see on the screen on the left, it's a reefer container. And on the right, among the reefer containers, there's the genset. That is the generator that is on the container itself. You can see that when we use reefer containers, it is transported by the sea. And there are some limitations because when you unload and load on the ship, well, it will become unplugged. Regarding CSELF or Envirotainer, you can see that it will be able to maintain its temperature even if it's not plugged for a certain amount of time. But for this, it will not be possible. So we need to think about what will be the right option. You can see a container with a genset generator. And according to our study, we can't put this like itself on the ship. When we unload the container, for example, we have sent a container to Bolivia and then we unloaded it in Chile, and then we attached the genset generator, and then it was sent again to Bolivia. I think then there was the electricity transport or delivery that was difficult, and we did not know why the genset was attached at the time, but I think there were some challenges, so that was what happened. You can see the reefer container and the passive packaging. You can see the pallet shipper and reefer container together, and because a lot of this was needed to be sent, we tried to find a way to send it by sea because it was very expensive to send by air, and there is the reefer container limitation, loading and unloading issue on the ship, and when we have the transshipment, when it goes a long distance, then it might have to have a stopover and transfer to another ship. So it will be unplugged every time, and then there will be a temperature impact. So we wanted to protect it from that impact. And pallet shipper was a complementary solution. On the right side, you can see the temperature data. And you can see the outside temperature and the inside temperature. And you can see some temperature spikes in between. And for example, it can go up at Busan port and then once at Panama port and at Chile port. So whenever we have the transshipment, this spike might occur. We wanted to try to expand the solution, so we had put in many sensors for temperature outside of the pallet shipper and in many places. So when we had temperature spikes and lows, we tried to see the reading of the temperature inside and outside. And for the spikes, we saw that there was temperature impact and there was some change. What we think is that in the long term, if we want to use these solutions, then we would need to complement some of the vulnerabilities. I think this is not something for us, but it is something that we need to cooperate with. And the packing solution companies and the transport companies will need to collaborate with us so that we can come up with a great solution. You can see this is a route here. Well, I heard this story from a person in Brazil, and I heard something very shocking about inland transportation in Brazil, and it was on YouTube. Well, I'm sure that this is not precious medicine as cargo, but if you visit the YouTube link, what happens is that the truck drivers will drift, and they just do it not because it's an accident, but because it's fun. And they drive very toughly because they think it's fun for the truck drivers. And our partners tell us that this does occur. It's not something that is very rare. So getting good quality inland transport is also a very meaningful activity. I will not show the YouTube clip to you here, but you can find it later if you want. And you can also see cargo terminal and warehouse. I visited CAS Cargo Warehouse in Korea, and there is the tarmac of the airports. And when we see the cargo that is waiting, it will not matter to cargo that does not need any temperature control. But when we think that the medication that we need to ship that is very sensitive to temperature, if it's left out on the tarmac like this, well, we could be very concerned. We also hear from the airports or from other companies that the refrigerated cargo will go into the airplane at the last minute, and if it does not take off soon, then it will go back to the refrigerator and then come back. But I was also concerned after seeing this on the tarmac. We need to come up with the best route to send cargo, and the quality, I think, can change according to where you transship. In the case of packing, there could be packing validation and shipping validation. And for the route, we can also put in the shipping validation. And if the routes are set, then the principle is not to change the route. But in reality, sometimes it does change. In some cases, the routes change. But if there is a proven route, then the basic principle would be to follow that route. Lastly, you can see custom clearance. We did our best to research and to hedge our risks, but this is a very challenging area for the less developed countries. The consistency of customs clearance sometimes does not exist. Sometimes it is cleared, sometimes it is not. And our activity might be the same, but the results might be different. The documentation that is demanded might be different, and something that we thought was not needed might be demanded. So I don't have a solution for this because we just have our experience. If a country's customs wants a great amount of documents, then we try to find out what they are and we try to supply it to them so that they can be satisfied. Let's look at a case study. This is a case study in cold chain, and we had a failure, and this was the process of trying to overcome that failure. You can see from Incheon to Dubai, and then it will go to Tehran. And you can see that we needed to have 2 to 8 degrees of Celsius of storage condition. Packaging was single-use passive package solution, double-layer EPS insulation. And you can see coolant was PCM and water that was mixed together. Not a lot of PCM was included, so the performance was not as high as could be. But for us, it was the most appropriate packing solution. You can see that the green part, the green graph, is for the outside temperature, and the blue graph is for the inner box, the log data, the temperature. And you can see it was in October, and you can see the outer box temperature was higher than 20 degrees, and then it went up to 30 degrees at peak temperature. You can see in Incheon Airport, it showed a peak, and the second peak was in Dubai Airport. You can see the impact by the outer area. It leads to the inner box area going up, and you can see in Dubai the peak went up. So there was an area that exceeded 8 degrees Celsius, so it became a problem. You can see for these areas, they were problematic. So through the airport and the forwarder, we asked for an explanation, but we couldn't get a clear explanation. In the early part of my presentation, I mentioned that in cold chain, we become very lonely. And we get a lot of feedback saying that it doesn't seem that I am at fault. So I think that happens often. So we need to try to resolve it by ourselves. And when there is this type of incident, we would engage in root cause investigation. So for the different routes, for the trucking, for storage, for the airport tarmac related activities, and transfer activities at Dubai, all of that is investigated and guessed. And in this process, we do come to a conclusion after we do the investigation, and we see that in ICN Airport warehouse, there was some management challenges, and at Dubai Airport warehouse, there were some difficulties that were caused as well. At Tehran Airport, I think it was well managed. Maybe it was because they had less volume, but they had good warehouse storage conditions in the freezer units, and we need to engage in preventive action. Easy way would be for us to change the packing solution to a better one, and in this case, well, we do know there could be a better packing solution, but in most cases, we need to find the most cost-effective way. So we can't choose something because that has the best performance if it's too costly. So we try to find the right fit for us at the right price point. Also, in the airport warehouse, after getting them in and out, we asked for picture evidence. And the airport does not like that. They don't like us making those demands. And in the case of Dubai Airport, they were very much against our suggestion. Regarding the products that were compromised, we also need to talk to other entities and its corrective action. So we need to ask for stability information, and if it's too extreme, then we might have to have QC done at the site. So this is also a process that's not easy. So taking the data, well, looking at the temperature deviation and to see whether that could happen, well, that's a scientific perspective. And there is the mean kinetic temperature, MKT, and this is something that I will explain later on with the stability test. In pharmaceuticals, we would engage in many types of stability tests. There is the approved temperature, and then we would engage in the stability for light, humidity, and other categories. And at ICH, they divide the world into different zones, zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4B. You can see that they are asking for stability tests for different areas. For example, if you're going to South America in a very hot and humid place, then it would be zone 4B. So you need to meet the requirements for zone B in terms of stability. If during the transport, if there is a deviation in the temperature, then you would need to explain, and sometimes it is accepted and sometimes it is not. We do our best to try to persuade and appeal, and sometimes even try to put a little bit of pressure on them and say that this is the last we have, and if this is not sent, then we can't send more in the future. And you can see MKT here, and I will try to explain what this is. You can see MKT has a goal to assess the impact while making uniform the temperature changes that have been exposed during the storage and distribution process of the pharmaceuticals. So you can see the calculation and the formula, and US Pharmacopoeia also recognizes that this can be utilized, and maybe it is not accepted, but I think it is acknowledged and utilized. You can see it needs to be in the data log, and you would get more data if the data intervals are sliced thinly, and you would need to find out what kind of impact it has on the temperature, and you could try to appeal. However, what you need to pay attention to is that the decision to accept this will fall on the part of the buyer and the government, and this is probably an auxiliary method. This is the last slide, and this might not be the best example, but for ice cream, if it goes over a certain temperature, then we can tell right away. However, for medication, even if there is temperature excursion or deviation, we can't know right away. In engaging in cold chain, we need to be more prudent because of that, and medication is something for human beings' consumption. So if this has a negative impact on a human being because of the temperature change, then it will be very saddening for us that manufacture and sell the drugs. Well, to choose a solution, well, we need to see its cost and effectiveness. We have the responsibility that we're handling medication that impact the health of people, and for the company, we try to find the most cost-efficient solution. So we, I think, are somewhere in between. And I think that is why we're there to work and to try to find the best way going forward. I talked about the perspective of the manufacturer and the seller and the person who is involved in cold chain, and what are my personal thoughts. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much, Team Leader Choi Yong-jun, for your presentation. You talked about different cases, and I think it was very interesting to hear your experiences. You mentioned about when there are the temperature deviations, and you talked about root cause investigation and kappa as well. And you talked about this in detail, so I think your talk was very helpful to the working level staff who are directly involved. We have the road transport, the air transport, and the sea transport, and also hybrid methods that were covered in your presentation. And I think your talk was very enriching to us. Thank you very much for sharing with us your experiences. The third presentation by President Erman Wilfu was disconnected due to internet issues. It will be a bit difficult to have him back because of internet connection issues, and it is very unfortunate that we were not able to enjoy his presentation to the end. And President Erman Wilfu, well, I think I will need to visit you to listen to the rest of your presentation. I think 2 pages were still left.
But he was able to cover the main points in the presentation. He talked about patient-centered, safe distribution, and the stakeholders need to share the pain points and to solve the problem. Collaboration is very important, And he talked about the trust pyramid, and at the very top, there was the mindset and GDP compliance and the infrastructure and expertise. So in areas where we cannot see there are differences made.
Team leader Choi Young-jun compared ice cream to pharmaceuticals. For ice cream, we know right away when it melts, but for medication, it's hard for us to know. But for Zolik Pharma that distributes pharmaceuticals, well, I think you have a very important role you play between the pharma manufacturers and the users, the patients that use the medication. We heard from the 4 presenters. Thank you very much. And I hope that this session will be helpful to you in understanding the trends and solutions related to cold chain logistics in the biopharma field. Thank you very much, the 4 presenters and all the participants who have tuned in for our session.
세션이 진행될 예정.
We will soon have the Envirotainer session 2. Please stay with us. This was the Biopharma Cold Chain Logistics Trend and Solution session. Thank you.